And now welcome to the stage your next act, Heide.
Hi. I want to talk to you about making a living. Because making a living's hard, isn't it? I'm lucky enough to be self-employed, so I make a living, but it's not like I can afford fancy things like vegan Kit Kats or clothes. So last November, I saw this advert. Our local garden centre has a big Christmas grotto, and they wanted elves. They were recruiting elves. And I was thrilled at this because I thought, that's messing about for money. A bit like this, if there was money. So I decided to apply. And they wanted a CV. I thought, brilliant, an elf CV. An elf CV? What goes on that? Do I have to pretend I can build toys? Do I lie about my height? Because a CV is a piece of paper with lies written on it. So my old CV used to say, I like a challenge. That's because I once flushed a grapefruit down the toilet. And I liked it. So no, that stuff wouldn't do for my elf CV. I needed something different. Then it struck me. My old job, I used to work for one of those companies that was big on corporate social responsibility. So they like to say they did all of these things to pretend they're not evil capitalists. They like to pretend they did all this, but they didn't want anybody to spend time actually doing them. So it was these skiving things. That's where my elf CV was coming from. So my appraisal with my boss, Jeff, would have been like this. Heidi, hi. It's just hilarious. I've been looking down your list of achievements. Now, you've planted trees. You've got rid of all the straws in the canteen. And you've erected a 60-metre wind turbine. Remind me, Heidi, what's your actual job? I work in IT support, Jeff. But the thing is, yes, IT support. Now, you formed that group, didn't you? The support group for women who work in IT with terrible bosses. Can I tell you that was more than a bit disruptive? That was research for my white paper, Jeff. It was important because, no, wait a minute, your white paper was entitled, Jeff is a mad old sexist who doesn't let women finish sentences. Who asked you to write that? Your wife. So that's where I got all my elf CV material. And it worked because they asked me for an interview. So now I had to prepare for my elf interview, a panel interview. I got myself some stripy socks and a pointy hat with bells on, because you dress, like James said, for the job you want, right? I got a spray tan as well, but then I remembered that's Oompa Loompas. It turns out they weren't interested in any of that stuff. They asked me questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? I thought quickly and I said, the North Pole. And they said, go on. And I said, well, I want the Santa gig, obviously, because you've got to demonstrate ambition, haven't you? And they frowned and said, no, you haven't got what it takes to be Santa. And I said, what, really? I was a bit angry. I said, are we still, in this day and age, obsessed in what's in my pants? Are you telling me I can't be Santa because I don't have a sack? They said, no, Heidi, you can't be Santa because you haven't got a beard. I said, a beard? Give me 2 weeks. I like a challenge. So they must have been impressed because they gave me Mrs. Claus. They gave me the Mrs. Claus role, which is straight in at number 2. I was pretty pleased with that, £15 an hour. But the trouble is, Mrs. Claus comes with all of those outdated gender stereotypes. So she's like a surrogate mother to all the elves. She has to do all the baking, all the cleaning, she has to look after everybody. And the clothes, she even dresses like a servant. She wears this mop cap and a long dress with not one single pocket in it. The elves have these dungarees, which are what would happen if you got a dozen pockets and had to just join them together into a garment. Maximum pocketage. but not for Mrs. Claus. So anyway, I did the role. And then I thought, I've got a duty of care to these young people coming through the grotto. There's future Mrs. Clauses there, I need to free them from the drudgery. So I made a few changes. I I formed a support group for the elves. It's not my fault that they turned it into a union and they're now demanding staff discounts on their candy canes. It turns out Jeff was right, I am a bit disruptive. And the uniform has changed. We are now Christmas Spice. Mrs. Claus wears a dress like that of Jerry Halliwell, but it's in the shape of a Christmas tree, and all of the pockets in the dress can fit a vegan Kit Kat, because I am living the dream. Thank you, everybody.
That's it for Heide.